Welcome, friend. This is I Need Thee Every Hour, a podcast dedicated to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. You are listening to your ministering sister, Casey Mills. What are red flags? To me, red flags are basically a warning sign. You're going the wrong way, you're doing the wrong thing, this person is not to be trusted, etc., etc. As Christians, we're taught to, quote-unquote, turn the other cheek, forgive 70 times 7, judge not lest ye be judged. And yet, there are times when the Lord does not expect us to put up with abusive behavior. There are times to be steadfast, and there are also times when you should run. If you aren't close to the Lord and healthy in mind and spirit, you won't know the difference, and it will cause you and potentially others unnecessary suffering. Now, the red flags that I want to address in this episode are specifically in regards to marriage. And in all candidness, I want to share some significant red flags that I witnessed. And you're going to be surprised, and maybe some of it you might not be, but I'm not going to say any names. Obviously, I don't give my name, and I'm not going to give anyone else's names. Nor dates or specific locations if it's not terribly pertinent to the story. But I do believe that giving some of these details and being as candid as I can is helpful. So I started thinking back on, my situation in my previous marriage and what ultimately led to the downfall. And, my husband, he and I both have had many conversations on that subject, just basically trying to say, well, could I have known? And I can say wholeheartedly, yes, there were many red flags, and I should have paid attention to them, and I should have known better. But I also know that I was dealing with my own issues, my own mental health issues, my own insecurities, and essentially two unhealthy people whose dysfunctional puzzle piece, as it were, fit together. Then they're going to find each other, and that's what I believe. That's what I've seen time and again. That's what I experienced, and so I'm going to kind of lay it out for you a bit, just to either have something to commiserate with or to perhaps help you to avoid the pitfalls that I found myself in. So I'll get right to it. I decided to narrow it down to basically 2 significant red flags in each section or stage of the relationship, if you will. So 2 significant red flags when I was dating my previous spouse. Now, there were girls that he was friends with. Incidentally, these were girls that I knew from high school and church. And because the church that I met him at was they call it a singles ward. It's basically a specific church location for people who are of a certain age and are single. It helps people to associate with their peers and potentially meet a future mate. For some people, they prefer to just stay in what they call the married wards, and some people like to attend the singles wards. And so for me, at the time, I thought it was cool. And that's where I went, and that's where I met him. And so, you would think, okay, I'm meeting someone of my own faith, and I'm I'm around other people of my faith, you think there's a certain commonality there, but not always. I think people well know that just because you attend the same church as someone, just because you work at the same company as someone, just because you grow up in the same family as someone, everybody has their own personalities, their own belief systems, and their own choices that they make. Agency, of course. So at the time, like I said, there were some girls that were, I say girls, I mean, they were older than me, but, we're all pretty young. But like I said, I had known them from high school, and so they became friends with this guy, okay, and were friends with him before I caught his eye, and he and I started to date. And these, I'm just going to say girls, because in my opinion, this behavior is very immature, okay? I think there was a bit of jealousy. I think they wanted to date him, and so it just kind of ended up turning into them, being jealous and trying to dissuade him basically from dating me, and telling him a lot of things about me that were not true, stretching the truth on some things. Like I said, these were girls I went to church with. These are girls that I knew in school. I actually kind of thought they were friends-ish, not close, but I mean friendly, right? So anyway, so he had told me that they had said talked a lot of crap about me basically, and it was very hurtful and very offensive. And I don't know anyone who takes that kind of a thing very well. I know that I have an issue with holding grudges, but I've had girls do this kind of stuff to me a lot throughout my life, and so it kind of gets to where I just kind of get sick of being around girls, basically. And so after that happened, like I said, I was pretty hurt, and I'm trying to set the record straight with him. I'm trying to say, well, that didn't happen, and I'm not like that, and blah, 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 and I'm just trying to defend myself, which is just dumb. Like, thinking back, I'm like, I should not have to defend myself, right? But I did. I felt the need to defend myself, and by the way, I was 18. Yeah, so anyway, okay. He said he didn't believe what they were saying about me. He claimed he tried to defend me. In the end, I just kind of thought, well, if he still likes me, still wants to date me, if things are meant to be, it's meant to be, whatever, we'll get past this, right? And of course, in my naivete, of course, because like I said, I was only 18, I believed he wouldn't be friends with these girls anymore. And, because, okay, here I am, and I'm saying this is still the way I am. I expect other people to do the things that I would do, right? I think generally everybody feels that way. It's like, well, if I wouldn't do that, then I would expect other people not to do that, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I actually stopped being, associating with male friends, mostly, communicating with male friends. I was, in my mind, I was taking my relationship seriously, and so I was pretty much only associating with him, and not even so much my girlfriends anymore, which actually probably wasn't the best thing in hindsight, but nonetheless, I thought I was in love, whatever, right? And I thought he was too. Well, I ended up finding out. So here's red flag number one. Okay, sorry. Long story short, red flag number one. He comes to me and tells me that he went. As far as I'm concerned, it was a date. He went on a date with one of these girls that had badmouthed me and really had laid into me and I think I wasn't. I think I was pretty clear about how I felt about her and her friends, and anyway, just the whole situation. So in my mind, okay, I'm already trying to take steps toward being serious and avoiding, avoiding even the appearance of evil. I wouldn't be going out alone with a single male, right? Especially not someone who I knew maybe was interested in me and was clearly jealous of my relationship. I don't think I would risk screwing up my relationship by going somewhere with someone of the opposite sex in that situation. However, he did this. He went out and went shopping and went out with this gal in what could only be construed as a date. I would say they got food, they went shopping, and the only reason why he fessed up to it is because he happened to run into actual friends of mine while he was out. And he just assumed that they would probably tell me, and they didn't. So that's another story for another time about my poor choice in female friends in my life. But anyway, because he was afraid that they would tell me as well, that they should have, he fessed up that he had done this, and he had no intention of telling me. That he had gone and done that, which obviously, well, if you can't tell your girlfriend what you're doing, then you're probably doing something wrong. Anyway, I was very angry that he had done that. I thought that was highly inappropriate, and he obviously was hiding it from me, and I couldn't understand why. Like, why in the world would you do that? Why would you don't like her, okay? You've made that clear, but it was clearly worth ruining your relationship with me over, right? So she must be pretty important to you then. Well, he claimed he didn't care about her. He just really wanted to go shopping and didn't want to go alone. And she was the only person that was available, and he knew that she would go with him. And I'll just say, what was I doing at the time? I was working. He wasn't working. I was working. So there's a little precursor for a future episode. Anyhow, I forgave him. He told me he was sorry. Said he'd never do it again. Realized that it was dumb after he saw my friends. Whatever. For some reason, I believed him. Okay. On to the next red flag. After that happened and I got pretty upset, and I basically told him, if you have friends who don't support your relationship, especially if you are serious about me, then these people shouldn't be your friends. I still to this day believe that. I do not think, especially if you think you're going to marry the person, and then after you marry the person, if you have friends that are not supportive of your relationship, are not supportive of your marriage, they got to go. Sorry, that's just how I feel about it. I don't care how long you've known them. I don't care how good of a friend they are to you or how much they've gotten you through. Your marriage is it, right? That should be your priority. That should be your number one, after the Lord, of course. Anyway, silly me for thinking that, okay? Now I will add one little thing, too, on top of the fact that I was only 18. He was 10 years older than me, okay? Had never been married before. Had only had maybe one serious relationship before that. Anyway. So after I said this to him, and, I was really only talking about these girls who he, in his own words, said were not that important to him. And that was part of why I shouldn't care that much about what they were saying about me, or that he was, spending time with them, that they didn't mean anything to him, right? Is what he said. Well, he told his best guy friend, I'll say, he was his roommate, one of his roommates, but he had told him about this. And, oh boy, well, his friend was a guy who was also his age and also not married, okay? He decided that I was wrong, and he needed to convince me that I was wrong and that I was being cruel, basically, for expecting him to ditch his friends for me. And, so he told his friend this, and his friend completely confronted me with my boyfriend sitting right there, letting him berate me, basically. They completely ganged up on me, bullied me, trying to get me to admit I was wrong, trying to convince me that I was being basically evil, right? And anyway, that I would say that was a pretty big red flag. The fact that he went behind my back and told a personal conversation to a close friend who clearly was also not supportive of our relationship and our future marriage. Because like I said, we obviously we did. We ended up getting married, unfortunately. So that was a pretty big red flag. I don't think that was appropriate for him to go to his friend and tell him those things and allow his friend to verbally assault me, essentially. You know, mind you, I'm little. I am a small woman. I'm barely under 5'2". His friend was easily twice my size. Okay. So the fact that his friend thought it was okay to confront me and bully me like that, and, you know, my future hubby thought that was appropriate too. He obviously was just sicking him on me. He was his guard dog, basically. So, 2 significant red flags while we were dating. That's only 2. Okay. But in the end, we got married. There's lots more that I need to share about all of this. There's a lot to unwrap, and I would like to write a book one day, because my hope and prayer is to help other unsuspecting young women who are dealing with their own mental health or spiritual issues, keep them from ending up in the same kind of a situation, because it ended up being 12 years of hell. So now I will move on to 2 significant red flags on our wedding day. Okay. Now, this is someone who I really thought, you know, he was a good guy. He had served a full-time, honorable, as far as I know, mission for our church, 2-year mission. You know, and I think there's a misconception in our church that, oh, he's a returned missionary, right, is what they call him, an RM. So that means he's good. That means he's perfect. No, it does not. No, it really does not. So I'm just going to come right out and say that. So anyway, we had barely kept from having sex before getting married, and so therefore we were able to be married in one of our holy temples. That's also another, I think, misconception in our church, and you know, in no way do I mean to downplay the church, the religion, the gospel, or the temples. They are all holy, and we just have to deal with imperfect people, right? The gospel is perfect, and Christ is perfect, but people are not. And unfortunately, every organization is run by imperfect people. So after we were married in one of the holy temples, and after we were married and we were in the car alone, we were in the vehicle heading to the location of what was to be our wedding brunch with everybody that had attended the wedding. He was driving, and I can't remember exactly what he said. It was kind of something like, oh, hey, now I can do this. And he reached down the front of my dress and began fondling my breasts. And I felt paralyzed, because in my mind, of course it feels like an assault, but yet, well, he's my husband now. He's allowed to touch me, right? Now it's okay for us to be naked together and, touch each other and do these things, right, that married people do. So it was very conflicting. And I felt so uncomfortable, and I felt so conflicted, and I know I was just paralyzed, and I'm sure the look on my face was not a pleasant one. And I remember he removed his hand, and he said something like, "If you don't want me to do that, just say so." And I said, it's a fog. I don't remember what I said. I think I just said okay. I mean, I just don't. It was very. Yeah, it was, like I said, that was a red flag. That should be an indicator of what our future marriage ended up being like. And then, probably not a surprise then, I would say the second red flag was, we're at this wedding brunch. We're eating with all of our family and close friends, and he wanted to leave. He wanted to leave early because he wanted to go to our hotel room that we had booked for that night, our wedding night, and have sex, basically. He'd been waiting, right? And I was very embarrassed. I mean, and that's not to say that I wasn't interested in having sex, of course, but just not right then, really. It was very obvious why we were leaving. We're leaving early. Why? And I remember one of my sisters even said something, she was teasing, about it, but it was embarrassing. I was super embarrassed because, yeah, just totally inappropriate. It's like, dude, just hold your horses, There's time for that, all right? You don't have to do it right then. But in my opinion, looking back, it was another red flag. So take with that what you will. There's so much more I wanted to talk about with these red flags, but I am kind of running low on time. So I will make this a 2-part episode about red flags. I will end with the 2 red flags from our honeymoon. Now, we went to Hawaii for our honeymoon, and I felt very, very lucky to get to go to Hawaii. I'd always wanted to go. And we ended up visiting 2 islands, and, there was definitely parts of it that were pretty incredible, but some parts of it that were truly awful. One was we didn't have a lot of money, and one way that we were trying to keep it affordable was to not eat out. I don't know if we ate out at all, but because we had rented we found a really cheap Airbnb to stay in, and so, of course, there was a kitchen, and so we ended up getting some food from the grocery store in order to, just have meals at the Airbnb. And when we were at the grocery store, honestly, I thought we were having a good time. I felt like we were just kind of joking around. It just kind of felt like, okay, this is what married couples do. You go grocery shopping together, blah, 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 whatever. And we were trying to plan out our meals and stuff. Well, we got back to the condo, and again, it's a little bit of a fog because it seemed so out of the blue. But the best way I can say it is he verbally assaulted me. He was screaming at me. Now, this would also be a precursor for the rest of our marriage, specifically in regards to finances. This is someone who really did not want to spend money on anyone or anything and would find every reason in the world not to spend any of his own money. If it was anybody else's money, that was okay. And if he could get other people to spend their money on him or on whatever it was, then that's certainly what he would do. But spending his own money, it had to be a pretty big deal. So I think in my best assessment, he didn't like how much money we had spent at the grocery store. And instead of maybe telling me ahead of time, maybe having a budget, I knew nothing. I mean, I'm telling you, I was young. I had never done a budget before. I'd barely even handled a checkbook up until that point. I hadn't really learned some of those kinds of things real well yet. And, he was working, I was working. I knew we had gotten some money for gifts, monetary gifts. I just didn't know. He handled the finances the entire marriage, right from day one. He handled the finances. He knew everything about the bank account, all bills, everything. I knew nothing, and I handled nothing, and I was not privy to anything. And so when someone explodes at you over the money that they say you spent, it can make you feel as tall as an ant. And when you have this person who's supposed to love you and who you think you love berating you and telling you how horrible you are because you spent money on food, that really does something to you mentally and emotionally and spiritually. Any joy, any spirit, any good spirit, anything good that was between us or that had happened throughout that day or in that condo was gone instantly. And I will never forget how awful he made me feel and how completely out of the blue it was. And uncalled for, completely uncalled for. I was not forcing him to buy anything. In my mind, we made every decision together on the food that we purchased. I don't even know how much it ended up being. I'm sure it was hardly anything. I mean, really, truly, it probably wasn't that much money because, this is like I said, this is someone who is incredibly cheap. Financial abuse. I finally, at some point, learned that there is a term for financial abuse, and that is definitely what I was subjected to. So that was pretty awful. And then I will leave this episode with what I believe is a pretty quintessential example of my marriage to that person. We had gone to another island and in Kauai, and there was a kayak you could rent, and you would basically kayak downriver and to a certain spot. You're supposed to get out, and then you can hike or whatever the case may be. It's a little, the details of that part of it are a little foggy to me now, but I just remember that we had gotten going late, and that they were advising you against getting going too late on this particular kayak trek, because when you're trying to come back, you'd be fighting winds and fighting to go upstream, essentially. And it's not recommended because it would be almost impossible to get back. And so really, truly, he actually had lived in Hawaii before. He obviously, like I said, I was young. I didn't know. I'm trusting him. He probably should have said, hey, let's not do this today or not at all then. But, I just went along with whatever, and I thought, well, maybe we can hurry and maybe we'll make it back in time. I didn't know. Anyway, needless to say, we did make it back. Excuse me, that sounded deceiving. We did not make it back in time to avoid these winds. All right, and so it was not an enjoyable kayak ride back because it was like you're paddling as hard as you possibly can, and you're looking at the scenery next to you, and it's not moving. The water's moving, and you're paddling as hard as you can, but the scenery's not moving. And so you're not going anywhere. And so, in the end, I don't even know how long we paddled for. And I just remember it was so, so hard, but it was like jungle around us. So it wasn't really like you could hike back with your kayak. Like this was like the way to get back. It was my understanding. So it was like, we have to just do this. We have to just paddle and just keep working, even if we only move, an inch a minute, kind of a thing. And I remember it was so hard and I was so tired. And I remember my arms were going numb. And it just felt like it was never going to end, but I just kept on moving. I was sitting in front, okay? I was sitting in front, and so I remember thinking, I can't stop. We both need to be paddling, and we both need to not stop because this matters, right? Like he's depending on me, and I'm depending on him, and this matters that we get back. And so even if my arms are going numb, even if I'm so exhausted, like I have to, and I'm praying, and I just have to keep paddling. And I did not stop. I never stopped. I kept paddling. We finally made it back. By some miracle, we finally made it back. And I want to say it was on the drive then back to where we were staying. He was laughing and admitting to me that he was taking breaks from paddling. And he felt a little guilty because he could see that I never stopped, but I couldn't see that he had ever stopped. And yet it still didn't stop him from taking breaks when he needed it. And I'm realizing it was probably those times when I'm looking at the scenery and seeing that it wasn't moving, that he had stopped. But I didn't know. In my mind, he's the man. He's stronger than me, a little bigger than me, wasn't much taller than me, but supposedly he was a surfer and stuff, right? So he should have all this strength and endurance. And yet here he is the one taking breaks and making his poor little wife continue paddling our kayak all by herself. I'll end there, and the red flag conversation will continue in our next episode.